Hello and welcome. In the annals of history, few tales are as captivating and enduring as that of the Vikings, those seafaring Norsemen whose exploits echo across the centuries. Emerging from the mist-shrouded fjords of Scandinavia, the Vikings embarked on a journey that would reshape the world in ways both profound and lasting. This documentary, The Viking Saga, A Journey Through the Norse World, delves deep into the saga of these extraordinary people, exploring their complex legacy from their origins to their eventual transformation. The Viking Age, spanning from the late 8th century to the early 11th century, was a period marked by daring exploration, formidable raids, and intricate cultural exchange. It began with the infamous raid on the monastery of Lindisfarne in 793 AD, a dramatic and violent episode that announced the arrival of the Norsemen to the wider European stage. But the Vikings were more than just raiders. They were pioneers who navigated uncharted waters, established settlements across continents, and forged connections that bridged distant lands. The Norsemen hailed from a rugged and challenging environment. Scandinavia's icy landscapes, with their fjords and dense forests, shaped a people known for their resilience and ingenuity. From these harsh conditions, they ventured outwards with a remarkable combination of courage, skill, and ambition. Their longships, masterfully designed for both open seas and shallow rivers, became symbols of their far-reaching influence, allowing them to explore, trade, and conquer across Europe, Asia, and even the Americas. The Viking Saga is not just a tale of conquest and plunder, but also one of settlement and integration. The Norsemen established thriving colonies in places like Iceland, Greenland, and Newfoundland, leaving an indelible mark on these regions. Their settlements were not mere outposts, but vibrant communities that adapted to their new environments while maintaining their distinctive Norse culture. Yet, the Vikings were also astute traders, connecting various parts of the world through a network that spanned from the Byzantine Empire in the east to the British Isles in the west. Their trade routes were not just conduits for goods, but also channels for cultural and technological exchange. The artifacts they left behind, jewelry, weapons, and runestones, speak of their far-reaching interactions and the sophisticated society that existed beyond the raiding and warfare. To truly understand the Vikings, one must look beyond their reputation as fearsome warriors. The Norsemen possessed a rich and intricate belief system, deeply rooted in their mythology and spirituality. Their pantheon of gods, including Odin, Thor, and Freyja, was not merely a collection of deities but a reflection of their worldview, a world where fate, honor, and the natural forces intertwined in a complex tapestry. Their cultural practices, from grand rituals and sacrifices to the intricate art of storytelling, were integral to their identity. The sagas and eddas that have survived through the ages provide a window into their lives, revealing a society that valued courage, wisdom, and kinship. These stories, passed down through generations, are as much a part of their legacy as their historical achievements. As the Viking Age drew to a close, the forces of change transformed the Norse world. The consolidation of powerful kingdoms in Europe, the spread of Christianity, and the shifting economic and political landscapes contributed to the decline of Viking dominance. The once feared raiders became part of a new European order, their influence morphing from that of invaders to integral members of emerging Christian kingdoms. This transformation was not a sudden or complete break, but a gradual process that saw the Norsemen adapt and integrate into the broader European context. The legacy of the Vikings endures not only in the history books, but in the cultural and genetic tapestry of the regions they touched. Their story is a testament to the dynamic interplay between conquest and integration, destruction and creation. The Viking Age may have ended, but the fascination with this remarkable era continues. The stories of the Norsemen, of their voyages, their gods, and their impact on the world, remain as compelling today as they were a millennium ago. This documentary seeks to unravel the complex narrative of the Vikings, offering a comprehensive exploration of their achievements, beliefs, and transformations. Through expert insights, historical analysis, and a deep dive into Norse culture, the Viking Saga, a journey through the Norse world, aims to illuminate the multifaceted nature of this enigmatic people. It is a journey through time, from the icy fjords of Scandinavia to the far-flung reaches of their settlements, exploring the rich legacy left by the Vikings and their enduring influence on our world. Join us as we embark on this epic voyage, navigating the waters of history to uncover the saga of the Vikings, the seafarers, warriors, and explorers whose mark on the world is as enduring as the legends they left behind. Chapter 1: The Dawn of the Viking Age. The Vikings have long captured the imagination of historians, scholars, and the general public alike. Their image as fierce warriors, masterful seafarers, and cunning traders has been ingrained in popular culture, but the true story of the Vikings is far more complex and nuanced. This chapter will explore the origins of the Vikings, their society, and the beginning of the Viking Age, a period that would see the Norsemen spread their influence far beyond the Scandinavian peninsula. The term Viking is often used to describe the seafaring Norse people from present-day Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. However, it is important to understand that Viking was not an ethnic or national designation, but rather a term that referred to the activities of these people, specifically raiding and piracy. The word Viking itself likely originates from the Old Norse word vikinga, meaning a person who participates in a sea raid. Before the Viking Age, the Scandinavian societies were largely agricultural, with people living in small, tight-knit communities scattered across the region's fjords, valleys, and forests. The harsh climate and challenging landscape of Scandinavia shaped the Norse way of life, fostering a sense of resilience, self-reliance, and ingenuity. These early Scandinavian communities were organized into clans or tribes, each led by a chieftain. The chieftain held both political and religious authority, and his power was often derived from his ability to lead in battle and maintain the loyalty of his warriors. The Norse religion was polytheistic, with a pantheon of gods and goddesses led by Odin, the All-Father, and Thor, the god of thunder. These deities played a central role in the daily lives of the Norse people, influencing their decisions, values, and actions. The Viking Age is traditionally marked as beginning in 793 AD with the infamous raid on the Lindisfarne monastery on the coast of Northumbria, England. This attack was a shocking event for the Christian world, as the Vikings brutally sacked the monastery, killing monks, looting treasures, and desecrating religious artifacts. The raid on Lindisfarne is often cited as the first major Viking raid in Western Europe, but it was not an isolated incident. In the years leading up to 793, there were already signs of Norse expansion and raiding activity. The Scandinavian population was growing, and with limited arable land available, many young men sought opportunities elsewhere. Additionally, advancements in shipbuilding technology allowed the Vikings to construct the longships, sleek, fast, and highly maneuverable vessels that could navigate both open seas and shallow rivers. These ships were crucial to the Vikings' ability to launch surprise attacks and penetrate deep into foreign territories. Economic factors also played a role in the rise of the Viking Age. The Norse were skilled traders, and their voyages brought them into contact with distant markets in the British Isles, the Frankish Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and even the Islamic Caliphate. These trade networks exposed the Vikings to the wealth and riches of other cultures, which in turn fueled their desire for plunder. However, the reasons for the Viking raids were not solely driven by greed or necessity. The Norse had a warrior culture that prized honor, bravery, and the accumulation of wealth through combat. Going a Viking was a way for young men to prove themselves, gain fame, and acquire the resources needed to establish their own households. In this context, raiding was as much a rite of passage as it was an economic endeavor. To understand the Vikings, one must delve into the intricacies of their society and culture. Viking society was hierarchical, with a clear distinction between the classes. At the top were the nobility, including kings, earls, and chieftains, who held political power and owned large tracts of land. Below them were the freemen, known as cols, who were farmers, craftsmen, and warriors. The lowest class was made up of thralls, or slaves, who were typically captured during raids or born into servitude. Despite these social divisions, Viking society was surprisingly fluid. A man of low birth could rise in status through acts of bravery in battle or by amassing wealth through raiding and trade. Conversely, a noble could lose his status if he failed to maintain the loyalty of his followers or suffered significant defeats. The Vikings were also known for their legal system, known as the Thing. The Thing was an assembly of free men who gathered to resolve disputes, make laws, and elect leaders. It was a form of early democracy, where decisions were made collectively, and everyone had the right to speak. The Thing played a crucial role in maintaining order within Viking society, especially in the absence of a central authority. Religion was deeply intertwined with every aspect of Viking life. The Norse gods and goddesses were not distant, abstract beings, but rather powerful forces that directly influenced the world. The sagas and myths of the Norse pantheon were passed down orally, preserving the stories of gods like Odin, Thor, Loki, and Freyja. These stories were not just entertainment, they conveyed important moral lessons and cultural values, emphasizing the importance of courage, loyalty, and fate. The concept of fate, or Wyrd, was central to the Norse worldview. The Vikings believed that their lives were shaped by fate, which was woven by the Norns, three supernatural beings who controlled the destinies of gods and men. While fate was inevitable, the Vikings also believed that individuals could face their destinies with honor and courage. This belief in fate and the afterlife, particularly the idea of Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain, motivated the Vikings to seek glory in battle, knowing that a warrior's death would ensure a place among the honored dead. By the late 8th century, the Vikings had begun to expand beyond their Scandinavian homelands in earnest. Their longships allowed them to explore and raid distant shores, reaching as far as the British Isles, the Frankish Empire, and the Iberian Peninsula. These early raids were often opportunistic, targeting monasteries, towns, and coastal settlements that were poorly defended. The Viking raids were characterized by their speed and brutality. The longships could appear suddenly on the horizon, and before the local population could mount a defense, the Vikings would strike, looting and burning everything in their path. The psychological impact of these raids was profound, as the Vikings gained a reputation for being unstoppable and merciless. However, the Vikings were not just raiders, they were also explorers and settlers. As they ventured further afield, they began to establish permanent settlements in the lands they encountered. In Ireland, they founded cities like Dublin, which would become important centers of trade and Norse culture. In England, they established the Danelaw, a region under Viking control where Norse law and customs prevailed. In Normandy, they settled and eventually assimilated into the local population, giving rise to the Normans, who would later play a significant role in European history. The Viking expansion was not limited to the West. To the east, the Vikings, known as Varangians, traveled along the rivers of Eastern Europe, establishing trade routes that connected Scandinavia with the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. They founded the city of Novgorod and played a crucial role in the formation of the Kievan Rus, a precursor to modern Russia. The dawn of the Viking Age marked the beginning of a period of intense activity and expansion for the Norse people. From their humble origins in the Scandinavian peninsula, the Vikings embarked on a journey that would take them to the far corners of Europe and beyond. They were not merely marauders but complex and multifaceted individuals who left a lasting legacy on the cultures and societies they encountered. In the chapters to come, we will explore the height of the Viking Age, the impact of Viking expansion on Europe, and the eventual decline of the Viking era. We will delve into the lives of legendary Viking leaders, the sagas that preserve their stories, and the archaeological discoveries that continue to shed light on this fascinating period of history. The Vikings, with all their contradictions and complexities, remain one of the most intriguing civilizations of the medieval world, and their story is one that continues to captivate and inspire. Chapter 2: The Rise of the Viking Warriors. In the previous chapter, we explored the origins of the Vikings and the factors that sparked the Viking Age. As the Norsemen began their expansion, their warrior culture became one of the most defining aspects of their identity. This chapter delves into the lives of Viking warriors, their training, weaponry, battle tactics, and the role of warfare in Viking society. The rise of the Viking warrior was not just about brute strength and ferocity, it was also about skill, honor, and a deep connection to their gods and ancestors. The foundation of the Viking warrior ethos was built on the concepts of honor, loyalty, and bravery. From a young age, Norse boys were trained in the art of war, learning how to handle weapons, endure hardships, and cultivate a mindset that revered strength and courage. Physical prowess was essential, but so was mental fortitude. A true Viking warrior was expected to face death without fear, as dying in battle was considered the most honorable end one could achieve. This warrior code was closely tied to the Norse belief in fate and the afterlife. The idea of a glorious death in battle, leading to a place in Valhalla, the great hall of the slain ruled by Odin, was a powerful motivator. Valhalla was depicted as a paradise where fallen warriors would feast, fight, and prepare for Ragnarok, the end of the world. For the Vikings, the chance to join the ranks of the honored dead was worth any risk. Loyalty was another key element of the Viking warrior code. Warriors were expected to be fiercely loyal to their chieftains and comrades. This loyalty was often cemented through oaths and bonds of brotherhood, which were taken very seriously. A warrior who betrayed his lord or comrades would be considered worse than a coward, and his dishonor would stain his family for generations. Becoming a Viking warrior required rigorous training that began in childhood. Young boys were taught to wield various weapons, such as the sword, axe, and spear, as well as the bow and arrow. They practiced combat techniques, learned to fight in formation, and engaged in mock battles to hone their skills. Strength and endurance were crucial, as Viking warriors needed to be able to endure long voyages, carry heavy loads, and fight in harsh conditions. In addition to physical training, Viking boys were educated in the stories of their gods, heroes, and ancestors. These sagas were more than just entertainment, they were instructional tales that imparted the values and lessons necessary for a warrior's life. The stories of legendary figures like Sigurd the Dragon Slayer and Ragnar Lothbrok served as inspiration, teaching young warriors the importance of bravery, cunning, and the pursuit of glory. Warrior training also included the development of a keen sense of tactics and strategy. Viking chieftains were expected to be not just strong fighters but also skilled leaders who could outmaneuver their enemies. This required an understanding of terrain, the ability to read the movements of opposing forces, and the capacity to inspire and command troops in the heat of battle. The Vikings were known for their skill in crafting weapons and armor, which were essential tools of their trade. A Viking warrior's weapons were not just functional, they were also symbols of status and identity. The most common weapons used by Viking warriors included sword. The Viking sword, often called a sax or langseeks, was a highly prized weapon. These swords were typically double-edged and designed for slashing and thrusting. A well-made sword was a sign of wealth and prestige, and many warriors gave their swords names, believing them to possess unique powers. Axe. The Viking axe was perhaps the most iconic weapon of the Norsemen. Axes varied in size, from small hand axes to large two-handed battle axes. The simplicity of the axe made it a versatile and effective weapon, capable of cleaving through armor and shields. The bearded axe, with its extended lower blade, was particularly popular, as it could be used to hook an opponent's shield or weapon. Spear. The spear was the most common weapon among Viking warriors. It was inexpensive to produce and could be used for both throwing and thrusting. The spear's long reach made it effective in both individual combat and in the shield wall, where warriors fought side by side. Shield. The round wooden shield was a vital piece of a Viking warrior's equipment. Shields were often reinforced with metal rims and decorated with intricate designs, which not only served as identification but also as intimidation. The shield wall, or skjoldborg, was a tactical formation where warriors interlocked their shields to create a formidable barrier against enemy attacks. Helmet. Contrary to popular myth, Viking helmets did not have horns. A typical Viking helmet was made of iron and was designed to protect the head while allowing for good visibility and hearing. Some helmets featured a nose guard or full face protection. Armor. Armor was less common among Viking warriors due to its cost. The wealthiest warriors might have worn chainmail, while others relied on padded leather or simply the protection of their shield. The lack of heavy armor allowed Viking warriors to remain fast and agile, which was an advantage in both raiding and open combat. The Vikings were not just fierce fighters, they were also master tacticians who employed a variety of strategies to achieve victory. One of the most effective tactics used by the Vikings was the surprise attack. Their longships allowed them to strike suddenly and without warning, often catching their enemies unprepared. The element of surprise was a key factor in the success of many Viking raids. The shield wall was the cornerstone of Viking battlefield tactics. In this formation, warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with their shields overlapping, creating a wall of defense that was difficult to break. The front line would push forward, using their spears and swords to attack while protected by the shields. The shield wall required discipline and coordination, and it was most effective in close combat. Viking warriors were also adept at using the terrain to their advantage. They often chose battlefields that favored their strengths, such as narrow passes or riverbanks, where their mobility and knowledge of the landscape could be used to outflank and outmaneuver their opponents. In naval battles, the Vikings used their superior seamanship to gain the upper hand, often engaging in close-quarters combat on the decks of their ships. Another key aspect of Viking warfare was the use of psychological warfare. The fearsome reputation of the Vikings was itself a weapon. Stories of their brutality and mercilessness spread quickly, often causing enemy forces to break or flee before a battle even began. The Vikings also made use of berserkers, elite warriors who fought in a trance-like fury. These berserkers were believed to be invincible, and their wild, frenzied attacks could break the morale of even the most disciplined troops. While the image of the Viking warrior is typically male, women also played significant roles in Norse society and, on occasion, in warfare. The sagas and historical records mention shield maidens, women who took up arms and fought alongside men. These women were often depicted as fierce and capable warriors, motivated by the same desire for honor and glory as their male counterparts. The existence of shield maidens has been a subject of debate among historians, with some arguing that they were more myth than reality. However, archaeological evidence, such as the discovery of a high-status female warrior burial in Birka, Sweden, suggests that some women did indeed participate in battle. In addition to fighting, women in Viking society were responsible for managing households, raising children, and maintaining the farms while the men were away on raids. Their contributions were vital to the survival and prosperity of Viking communities. The Viking warrior was a product of his environment, shaped by the harsh Scandinavian landscape, the demands of a seafaring life, and the cultural values that placed a premium on strength, honor, and loyalty. These warriors were not just raiders and conquerors, they were also poets, explorers, and traders who left an indelible mark on the world. As we continue to explore the Viking Age, we will see how the prowess of these warriors allowed the Norsemen to carve out territories, forge new trade routes, and establish a legacy that would influence the course of European history for centuries to come. The rise of the Viking warrior was only the beginning of a story that would see the Norse people become one of the most formidable forces of the medieval world. Chapter 3: The Viking Expansion. The Viking Age was characterized not only by the fierce warriors and raiders of Scandinavia but also by their remarkable ability to explore, trade, and settle new lands. As the Vikings set sail from their homeland, they ventured far beyond the familiar shores of the North Sea, reaching as far as North America to the west and the Caspian Sea to the east. This chapter will explore the remarkable voyages of the Vikings, their establishment of new settlements, and the impact of their expansion on the world. The British Isles were among the first targets of Viking expansion. The initial raids, like the infamous attack on Lindisfarne in 793 AD, were swift and brutal, targeting monasteries and coastal settlements. These early raids were followed by more sustained campaigns of conquest and colonization. In England, the Vikings established the Danelaw, a region encompassing much of northern and eastern England where Norse law and customs prevailed. This area became a significant Viking stronghold, with towns like York, Jorvik, serving as major centers of trade and culture. The Vikings' influence in England was profound, leaving a lasting impact on the language, culture, and governance of the region. Ireland, too, felt the presence of the Vikings. The Norsemen founded several coastal cities, including Dublin, which grew into a thriving hub of trade and Viking culture. The Vikings' integration into Irish society was complex. They were both feared invaders and valuable trading partners. Over time, they intermarried with the local population, blending Norse and Gaelic cultures. The Vikings did not stop at the British Isles. They pushed further west to the Faroe Islands and Iceland. Iceland, in particular, became a significant Viking settlement. According to the sagas, the island was discovered by Norwegian settlers in the late 9th century, and by 930 AD, the Icelandic Commonwealth was established with the founding of the Althing, one of the world's oldest parliamentary institutions. The westward expansion of the Vikings reached its zenith with the discovery of Greenland by Eric the Red around 982 AD. Greenland's harsh climate made it a challenging environment, but the Norse settlers managed to establish farming communities and trade routes with Europe. However, the most extraordinary voyage was yet to come, the Viking exploration of Vinland, believed to be in present-day Newfoundland, Canada. Led by Leif Erikson around the year 1000 AD, this voyage marked the first known European contact with North America, centuries before Christopher Columbus. While the Vikings were establishing themselves in the west, they were also making inroads to the east. The Vikings who ventured eastward, known as Varangians, followed the great rivers of Eastern Europe, such as the Dnieper, the Volga, and the Don, leading them deep into the heart of what is now Russia, Ukraine, and beyond. The Varangians were not just raiders, they were traders and mercenaries as well. They established key trading posts along the river routes, connecting Scandinavia with the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic caliphates. Cities like Novgorod and Kiev became important centers of commerce and power, laying the foundations for the future Kievan Rus, a federation of Slavic and Viking states that would eventually evolve into modern Russia and Ukraine. One of the most famous Varangian leaders was Rurik, a semi-legendary figure who is said to have founded the Rurik dynasty, which ruled the Kievan Rus and later Russia until the 16th century. The Varangians' influence in the region was not only political but also cultural, as they intermarried with the Slavic population and helped to shape the emerging identity of the Kievan Rus. The Vikings' eastern expansion also brought them into contact with the Byzantine Empire, where many Varangians served as elite mercenaries in the Varangian Guard, the personal bodyguard of the Byzantine emperors. This prestigious unit was renowned for its loyalty and effectiveness in battle, with Varangians serving as both protectors of the empire and conduits for cultural exchange between Byzantium and the Norse world. The Vikings' influence extended southward as well, particularly in the region that would become Normandy in France. The Viking presence in France began with raids along the Seine River, culminating in the siege of Paris in 845 AD, led by the legendary chieftain Ragnar Lothbrok. The Frankish kings, unable to repel the Viking onslaught, resorted to paying tribute to keep the Norsemen at bay. However, the relationship between the Franks and the Vikings evolved from one of hostility to one of mutual benefit. In 911 AD, the Frankish king Charles the Simple granted the Viking leader Rollo and his followers land in the region that would become Normandy, from Northmen's land, in exchange for their loyalty and protection against other Viking raiders. Rollo's descendants would become the Dukes of Normandy, and the region would become a powerful and influential part of medieval Europe. The Vikings also ventured into the Mediterranean, raiding the coasts of Spain, Italy, and even reaching as far as North Africa. In the early 10th century, a group of Vikings under the command of Hastion launched a daring raid on the city of Luna in Italy, mistaking it for Rome. Although their raid was ultimately unsuccessful, it demonstrated the reach and ambition of the Viking explorers. In the Mediterranean, the Vikings encountered the sophisticated cultures of the Muslim and Byzantine worlds, leading to a rich exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. These encounters broadened the horizons of the Norsemen and introduced them to new opportunities for trade and conquest. While raiding and conquest are often highlighted in discussions of Viking expansion, trade and commerce were equally important aspects of the Viking Age. The Vikings were skilled traders who established extensive networks that connected Scandinavia with Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. The Viking trading routes were vast and diverse, ranging from the fur markets of the Arctic to the silver mines of Central Asia. Viking merchants traded a variety of goods, including furs, slaves, amber, walrus ivory, weapons, and jewelry. The discovery of hoards of Arab silver coins, known as dirhams, in Scandinavia attests to the extent of Viking trade with the Islamic world. The town of Hedeby in modern-day Germany was one of the most important trading centers of the Viking Age. Situated near the modern border of Denmark and Germany, Hedeby was a bustling port where traders from across Europe and beyond converged. The archaeological remains of Hedeby, including shipwrecks, weapons, and everyday items, provide a vivid picture of the town's significance in the Viking trading network. The Vikings' trading activities were not limited to goods, they also facilitated the exchange of knowledge, culture, and technology. The Vikings brought back not only material wealth but also new ideas, religious beliefs, and cultural practices that would influence Scandinavian society. The Vikings were instrumental in connecting the disparate regions of medieval Europe, creating a more interconnected and dynamic world. As the Vikings expanded their reach, they did not merely raid and leave. They often settled in the lands they encountered, establishing new communities that blended Norse and local cultures. These settlements became the foundations for future states and societies. In Iceland, the Norse settlers developed a unique society based on a system of governance that emphasized law, consensus, and personal independence. The Icelandic sagas, written down in the 13th century, preserve the stories of these early settlers and their struggles, triumphs, and feuds. The sagas are among the most important literary works of the Viking Age, offering valuable insights into Norse culture, values, and history. In Greenland, the Norse settlers established two main settlements, the Eastern and Western settlements. These communities thrived for several centuries, engaging in farming, hunting, and trade. However, by the 15th century, the Greenland settlements mysteriously disappeared, likely due to a combination of environmental changes, economic decline, and isolation. In England, the Vikings left an indelible mark on the landscape, language, and culture. The Danelaw introduced Norse legal and agricultural practices, many of which persisted long after the Viking presence had waned. The integration of the Vikings into English society was solidified by the reign of King Canute, a Danish king who ruled over a vast North Sea empire that included Denmark, Norway, and England in the early 11th century. In Normandy, the Viking settlers assimilated into the local population, adopting the French language and Christian religion. The Normans, as they became known, would go on to play a pivotal role in European history, particularly with the Norman conquest of England in 1066, led by William the Conqueror, a descendant of Rollo. The Viking settlements in Eastern Europe laid the groundwork for the development of the Kievan Rus, a powerful state that would become a major player in medieval politics and trade. The cultural and political legacy of the Vikings in Eastern Europe would continue to influence the region long after the Viking Age had ended. The Viking expansion was one of the most remarkable episodes of the medieval period. Driven by a combination of economic necessity, warrior ethos, and a thirst for adventure, the Vikings ventured far beyond their Scandinavian homelands, leaving a profound impact on the regions they encountered. Through their exploration, trade, and settlement, the Vikings helped shape the political, cultural, and economic landscape of Europe and beyond. Their influence can still be seen today in the place names, languages, and cultural traditions of the regions they once ruled. The Viking legacy is one of both destruction and creation, a testament to the complex and multifaceted nature of the Norsemen who sailed the seas and changed the world. In the next chapter, we will explore the religious beliefs and cultural practices that guided the Vikings in their daily lives and in their interactions with the wider world, shedding light on the spiritual and intellectual life of the Norse people during the Viking Age. Chapter 4: Norse Beliefs and Culture. As the Vikings expanded across Europe and beyond, they brought with them a rich tapestry of beliefs, rituals, and cultural practices that were deeply woven into their identity. Their religious beliefs centered on a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each embodying aspects of the natural world and human experience. The Vikings' worldview was shaped by their mythology, their understanding of fate, and their relationship with the divine. This chapter explores the spiritual and cultural dimensions of Viking life, from their worship of gods like Odin and Thor to their practices of storytelling, art, and daily rituals. At the heart of Viking religion was the Norse pantheon, a complex and diverse collection of deities who played a central role in the lives of the Norse people. These gods and goddesses were not distant or abstract. They were intimately connected to the natural world and the everyday experiences of the Vikings. Odin, the chief of the gods, Odin was a god of war, wisdom, and poetry. Often depicted as a one-eyed, bearded figure, Odin was associated with knowledge, magic, and prophecy. He sacrificed his eye in exchange for wisdom and hung himself from the world tree, Yggdrasil, to gain knowledge of the runes. Odin was also the god of the slain, presiding over Valhalla, where warriors who died in battle were honored. Thor, perhaps the most popular of the Norse gods, Thor was the god of thunder, storms, and agriculture. He was seen as a protector of both gods and humans, wielding his mighty hammer, Mjolnir, to defend against giants and other threats. Thor was a symbol of strength, courage, and loyalty, and he was revered by warriors and farmers alike. Freyja, a goddess of love, fertility, and war, Freyja was a complex and multifaceted figure in Norse mythology. She was associated with beauty, sensuality, and the mysteries of life and death. Freyja also had a warrior aspect, leading the Valkyries, female figures who chose the slain in battle and brought them to Valhalla or her own hall, Folkvanga. Loki, the trickster god, Loki was a shapeshifter and a figure of chaos and mischief. Although not inherently evil, Loki's actions often brought trouble and discord among the gods. His complex relationship with the other deities, especially his role in the events leading up to Ragnarok, the end of the world, made him one of the most intriguing and enigmatic figures in Norse mythology. Freyr, Freyja's brother, Freyr, was a god of fertility, prosperity, and peace. He was associated with agriculture, weather, and the harvest, and was often invoked to ensure a bountiful crop. Freyr was also connected to the cycle of life and death, symbolizing the eternal renewal of nature. Hel, the goddess of the underworld, Hel ruled over the realm of the dead who did not die in battle. Her domain, also called Hel, was a place where souls rested after death, a stark contrast to the warrior's paradise of Valhalla. Hel was often depicted as a grim and shadowy figure, embodying the inevitable fate that awaited all. The Norse gods were not immortal in the sense of being eternal. They were destined to die in the cataclysmic events of Ragnarok. This belief in the gods' eventual demise reflected the Vikings' understanding of the world as a place of constant change and impermanence, where even the divine was subject to the inexorable forces of fate. Religious practices in Viking society were closely tied to the cycles of nature and the demands of daily life. The Vikings believed that they could influence the gods and spirits through rituals, sacrifices, and offerings, which were performed to secure good fortune, protection, and success in their endeavors. Blots. A central aspect of Norse religious practice was the blot, a sacrificial ritual in which animals, and sometimes humans, were offered to the gods. These sacrifices were made to honor the deities, seek their favor, or appease them in times of crisis. The blood of the sacrificed animals was often sprinkled on the altar and the participants, while the meat was cooked and shared in a communal feast, reinforcing social bonds and the connection between the community and the divine. Seer was a form of Norse magic and shamanistic practice associated with prophecy, healing, and the manipulation of fate. Practitioners of seer, known as seikonas, women, or simon, men, would enter a trance-like state to commune with spirits or foretell the future. Seer was often associated with the goddess Freyja, and it was seen as a powerful but dangerous practice that could be used for both good and ill. Seasonal festivals. The Vikings marked the changing seasons with festivals that celebrated the cycles of life, death, and renewal. Yule was one of the most important of these festivals, held during the winter solstice to honor the rebirth of the sun and the lengthening of days. The celebration included feasting, toasts to the gods, and the lighting of fires to symbolize the return of light. Midsummer was another significant festival, celebrating the peak of summer and the fertility of the land. Offerings were made to Freya and other gods associated with growth and abundance, and the festival was marked by bonfires, dancing, and communal gatherings. The myths and legends of the Norse gods were more than just stories, they were the lens through which the Vikings understood the world and their place in it. These myths were passed down through generations in the form of oral tradition, later written down in the sagas and the Eddas, two major sources of Norse mythology. According to Norse mythology, the world was created from the body of Ymir, a primordial giant. The gods Odin, Vili, and Ve killed Ymir and used his body to form the earth, sky, and sea. His blood became the oceans, his bones the mountains, and his skull the sky. The first humans, Ask and Embla, were created from trees and given life by the gods. Yggdrasil and the Nine Worlds. Central to the Norse cosmology was Yggdrasil, the world tree, a vast ash tree that connected the 9 realms of existence. These realms included Asgard, the home of the gods, Midgard, the world of humans, Jotunheim, the land of the giants, and Helheim, the realm of the dead, among others. Yggdrasil was a symbol of the interconnectedness of all life and the cyclical nature of existence. Ragnarok. The Norse apocalypse, Ragnarok, was the prophesied end of the world, a time of great destruction and cosmic upheaval. According to the myths, Ragnarok would be preceded by a series of natural disasters and wars, culminating in a final battle between the gods and their enemies. The world would be consumed by fire, and the gods, including Odin and Thor, would fall. However, Ragnarok was also a story of renewal, as a new world would rise from the ashes, and life would begin anew. Fate and the Norns. The Vikings believed in an immutable force known as fate or Wyrd, which governed the course of all things, including the lives of gods and men. Fate was woven by the Norns, 3 supernatural beings who lived at the base of Yggdrasil. They spun the threads of destiny, determining the fates of all beings. Even the gods could not escape their fate, underscoring the Norse belief in the inevitability of death and the importance of living honorably. The cultural life of the Vikings was rich and vibrant, characterized by a deep appreciation for art, craftsmanship, and storytelling. These creative expressions were not only a means of personal and communal identity, but also a way to connect with the divine and the ancestors. Viking art. Viking art was distinctive and highly symbolic, characterized by intricate patterns, animal motifs, and interwoven designs. Runestones, often erected as memorials, were carved with runic inscriptions and adorned with elaborate designs. Wood carving was another prominent art form, with Norse motifs adorning ships, houses, and religious artifacts. Metalwork, especially in the form of jewelry and weapons, was another area where the Vikings excelled, combining function with aesthetic beauty. Runes and writing. The Vikings used a writing system known as runes, which were more than just letters, they were believed to have magical properties. The runes were used for a variety of purposes, from inscribing gravestones and memorials to casting spells and providing protection. The Younger Futhark, a runic alphabet of 16 characters, was the most commonly used by the Vikings during the Viking Age. The inscriptions found on runestones, weapons, and everyday objects provide valuable insights into the beliefs, language, and social structure of Norse society. Storytelling and sagas. Storytelling was a vital part of Viking culture, serving as both entertainment and a means of preserving history and values. The sagas, narratives that recounted the exploits of heroes, kings, and ordinary people, were an important literary form. These stories were passed down orally before being written down in the 13th century, long after the Viking Age had ended. The sagas provide a window into the values and worldview of the Vikings, emphasizing themes of honor, revenge, loyalty, and fate. The cultural and religious beliefs of the Vikings were reflected in their daily lives and social structure. Viking society was hierarchical but also emphasized individual honor and the importance of community. Social classes. Viking society was divided into several classes, with the jarls, nobles, at the top, followed by the cols, free farmers and craftsmen, and the thralls, slaves, at the bottom. Jarls were powerful leaders who controlled large estates and commanded loyalty from their followers. Cols were the backbone of society, working the land, crafting goods, and serving as warriors when necessary. Thralls were often prisoners of war or those who had fallen into debt, and they performed the hardest labor. Despite these divisions, there was some social mobility, and a successful Jarl could rise to the rank of Jarl through wealth, skill, or military prowess. The role of women. Viking women had a relatively high degree of freedom and autonomy compared to their counterparts in other medieval societies. Women could own property, manage households, and even divorce their husbands. They played a central role in the family and were responsible for maintaining the home, raising children, and managing resources. Some women, known as shield maidens, even took up arms and fought alongside men, although this was not the norm. The Viking household. The typical Viking household was centered around the longhouse, a large communal building that served as both a home and a social hub. Longhouses were constructed from wood, stone, or turf, with a central hearth that provided warmth and light. The longhouse was a place of work, rest, and social interaction, where families would gather to share meals, tell stories, and conduct rituals. The importance of honor. Honor was a fundamental value in Viking society, influencing behavior, relationships, and decisions. A person's honor was tied to their reputation, courage, and adherence to social norms. Maintaining one's honor was of utmost importance, and offenses against honor, such as insults or betrayal, could lead to blood feuds and acts of vengeance. This emphasis on honor was reflected in the sagas, where heroes were often judged by their actions in battle, their loyalty to their kin, and their ability to uphold their word. The cultural and religious practices of the Vikings were deeply intertwined, shaping not only their worldview but also the legacy they left behind. The Norse gods and myths continue to captivate modern audiences, inspiring literature, art, and popular culture. The Vikings' craftsmanship, storytelling, and social values have left a lasting imprint on the cultures of the regions they once inhabited. The next chapter will examine the end of the Viking Age, exploring the factors that led to the decline of Viking power and influence, and the transformation of Scandinavian society as it transitioned from a pagan warrior culture to a Christian kingdom. Chapter 5. The decline of the Viking Age and the dawn of a new era. The Viking Age, a period marked by exploration, conquest, and cultural exchange, gradually came to an end as the forces of change swept across Scandinavia and Europe. The decline of Viking dominance was not due to a single event, but rather a confluence of factors that weakened their power and led to the transformation of Viking society. This chapter delves into the key events and shifts that marked the end of the Viking Age, the influence of Christianity, and the legacy that the Norsemen left behind as they transitioned into a new era. Several factors contributed to the decline of Viking power in the 11th century. The once feared Norsemen found themselves increasingly challenged by both internal strife and external forces that reshaped the political and social landscape of Europe. The rise of stronger kingdoms. By the 10th and 11th centuries, the fragmented kingdoms and territories of Europe had begun to consolidate into more powerful and centralized states. Kings like Alfred the Great of Wessex, Otto I of the Holy Roman Empire, and the Capetian kings of France were able to build stronger armies and fortifications, making it more difficult for Viking raiders to achieve the same level of success as they had in earlier centuries. The Viking raids, which had once been relatively unchecked, now faced formidable resistance. The Christianization of Scandinavia. One of the most significant changes during this period was the spread of Christianity throughout Scandinavia. Christian missionaries had been active in the region since the 9th century, but it was in the 10th and 11th centuries that the conversion process accelerated, driven by both voluntary conversion and the political ambitions of local rulers. Kings like Harald Bluetooth of Denmark, Olaf Tryggvason of Norway, and Olaf Skotkonung of Sweden embraced Christianity, seeing it as a means to unify their realms and gain the support of powerful Christian neighbors. Christianity brought with it new cultural and social norms that gradually replaced the old pagan traditions. The Christian Church played a central role in the governance and daily life of the people, leading to a decline in the traditional Viking way of life. The construction of churches, the establishment of dioceses, and the integration of Scandinavia into the wider Christian world marked the end of the Viking Age's distinctive pagan identity. Economic shifts and trade networks. The Vikings were not only warriors but also traders who established extensive trade networks across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. However, as European economies evolved and new trade routes developed, the Vikings' dominance in commerce began to wane. The rise of powerful mercantile cities like Venice and the expansion of Byzantine and Islamic trade networks reduced the importance of Viking trade routes. Additionally, the increasing stability of European kingdoms reduced the demand for Viking mercenaries, further diminishing their economic influence. Internal struggles and power shifts. Within Scandinavia, the consolidation of power by emerging monarchies led to increased internal conflict and civil wars. These struggles for control weakened the Viking chieftains' ability to launch large-scale raids and expeditions. As power became more centralized, the focus shifted from raiding and exploration to domestic governance and territorial defense. The transition from a warrior society to a more settled, agrarian-based economy also contributed to the decline of the Viking lifestyle. Despite the gradual decline, the Vikings continued to launch significant expeditions well into the 11th century, though these were often motivated more by political ambitions than by the traditional Viking spirit of exploration. The Danish invasion of England, 1013 to 1016, one of the last major Viking campaigns, was the Danish invasion of England, led by King Sweyn Forkbeard and later his son, Knut the Great. Sweyn successfully conquered much of England, and after his death in 1014, Knut continued his father's campaign, eventually becoming King of England in 1016. Knut's reign marked the height of Viking power in England, but it was also a sign of the changing nature of Viking activity, with conquest and rulership replacing raiding and plundering. The Norwegian invasion of England, 1066. The year 1066 saw the last major Viking invasion of England, led by Harald Hardrada of Norway. Harold, seeking to claim the English throne, launched an invasion that culminated in the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Although Harold's forces initially met with success, they were ultimately defeated by the English king Harold Godwinson. The battle marked the end of the Viking Age, as just weeks later, Harold Godwinson himself was defeated by William the Conqueror at the Battle of Hastings, ushering in the Norman era in England. The Vinland expeditions. While the focus of Viking activity shifted away from raiding, the spirit of exploration persisted. The sagas recount the Norse expeditions to Vinland, modern-day North America, led by figures like Leif Erikson. These expeditions, occurring around the year 1000, were some of the last great acts of Viking exploration, demonstrating the enduring Norse desire to explore new lands. However, the Norse presence in Vinland was short-lived, and by the early 11th century, the settlements were abandoned. As the Viking Age drew to a close, the Norsemen gradually became integrated into the broader Christian European world. This integration was a complex process that involved the adoption of new religious practices, social norms, and political structures. The role of the Church. The Christian Church played a central role in this transformation. Monasteries and churches became centers of learning and culture, and the Christian clergy were instrumental in the administration of the newly formed kingdoms. The Church also introduced written laws and record-keeping, replacing the oral traditions that had previously governed Viking society. The formation of Scandinavian kingdoms. By the end of the Viking Age, the Scandinavian countries had begun to resemble the modern nations we recognize today. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden emerged as unified kingdoms under Christian monarchs, who sought to align themselves with the rest of Europe. The establishment of hereditary monarchy and the codification of laws further solidified the shift from the decentralized, clan-based society of the Viking Age to a more structured and hierarchical state. Cultural continuity and change. While the Viking Age officially ended with the rise of Christianity and the formation of stable kingdoms, many aspects of Norse culture persisted. The sagas, which had been passed down orally, were eventually written down and preserved, ensuring that the stories of the Viking Age would endure. Norse art, craftsmanship, and maritime skills continued to influence Scandinavian culture, and the memory of the Viking ancestors remained a source of pride. The end of the Viking Age marked the close of a remarkable chapter in history, but the legacy of the Vikings lives on. Their impact on the world was profound, shaping the political, cultural, and economic landscape of medieval Europe and beyond. The Vikings were not only warriors and raiders, but also explorers, traders, and settlers who connected distant lands and cultures. Their myths and sagas continue to inspire modern literature, art, and popular culture, keeping the memory of the Viking Age alive. The influence of the Vikings can be seen in the languages, place names, and cultural traditions of the regions they once ruled, from the British Isles to Normandy, from Iceland to the shores of North America. The transformation of Viking society from a pagan warrior culture to a Christian kingdom reflects the broader patterns of change that have shaped human history. The Vikings' ability to adapt to new realities, whether through the adoption of Christianity or the formation of new political structures, demonstrates their resilience and resourcefulness. As we look back on the Viking Age, we see a period of both destruction and creation, a time when the Norsemen left an indelible mark on the world. Their legacy is a testament to the complexity of history and the enduring power of human ambition, exploration, and cultural exchange. The documentary has taken us on a journey through the world of the Vikings, From their humble beginnings in the cold, rugged landscapes of Scandinavia to their rise as some of the most formidable seafarers and warriors in history. We've explored their raids, conquests, and settlements, as well as their rich cultural and religious life, and the eventual decline of their power. The Vikings were more than just the fearsome raiders of popular imagination. They were a people of great complexity, whose influence stretched far beyond the battlefield. They were explorers who charted unknown waters, traders who connected distant lands, and storytellers who wove tales of gods, heroes, and the end of the world. As we close this chapter on the Viking Age, we remember the Norsemen not just for their conquests, but for their contributions to the world as we know it today. Their spirit of adventure, their craftsmanship, and their legacy of resilience continue to resonate through the centuries, reminding us that the past is never truly gone. It lives on in the stories we tell and the cultures we inherit. The journey of the Vikings may have ended, but their story continues to inspire and captivate, a reminder of the enduring power of history and the human spirit. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.